And welcome back to the Morning Zone, a morning show on AM 650 KGAB. I'm Amy Richards, and as promised, I was a little bit panicked, but they showed up. Anyways, I have in the studio with me Amy Edmonds, former legislator and now education policy analyst, and Christy Hooley. I assume, Christy, you are a parent.
That is right.
So she's representing parents. And then Dr. Sandra Stotsky, who is traveling around the country, I understand, talking about this issue. Is that correct?
That is right.
Okay. So we're going to start. Amy, why don't you start? I have the bill in front of me. There is a bill, House Bill 97. When's it going to be introduced? Today?
I think this afternoon, yeah. You know how that is. We're not exactly for certain, but we've got a lot of parents from around the state who are coming down and going to be at the State House today, and we just want to encourage anyone locally who wants to take the opportunity to come and watch the process and be a part of really looking at making some changes in education to come on down to the State House.
And what the bill actually does, I'm just reading from the introductory paragraph, so what it does is it modifies the process for the adoption of content and performance standards by the State Board, establishes an advisory council for the adoption and content performance standards, and prohibiting participation in the Smarter Balance Assessment Consortium, which we'll get to, prohibiting expenditure of Federal American Recovery and Reinvestment Act funds, establishing state education data security policies and protocols, and imposing a penalty, which, many bills do.
Right.
So what does all that mean, Miss Former Legislator?
What it means is that, first of all, we're saying that we need to take a look at the English language arts and math standards. Dr. Stotsky can speak to the problems within the Common Core, which is what Wyoming has right now. We adopted these Common Core standards. This is saying, okay, we're going to go back, we're going to do the process correct, we're going to bring parents, business leaders to the table, and we're going to go ahead and over this year, so by December of this year, we're going to establish a new set of standards that are not the Common Core.
And Dr. Stotsky, tell us about what are the issues that you see in the standards right now?
The standards were produced by a lack of process and a totally non-transparent process. So this is what is partly important here in Wyoming, is to make sure that you develop first-class standards, which Common Core standards are not, by a process that is open, that involves all the relevant stakeholders, and then tries to address all the flaws that are in both the ELA and the math standards.
Okay, so you're saying on a national level, which is what these standards are, they were developed without participation from the people, parents.
They were developed without, I was on Common Core's validation committee, so I know that the major groups that had almost no role in the development of these so-called national standards were, first of all, parents, second of all, teachers, third of all, state legislators who are being expected to pay the bills, and then local school boards who were bypassed by a state board of education's decision to overnight adopt standards that nobody knew anything about.
And then the state started adopting the standards, which is what happened in Wyoming, correct?
Right, yeah, we were part of it. It happened literally within about a 4-week, 5-week period all across the country. States just rushed and adopted them, and there's a whole bunch of reasons why that happened.
Was one of them the threat of not getting your money from the federal government?
Race to the top was the carrot that was being offered by the U.S. Department of Education, and every state was trying to get some of that money. Even if it ultimately didn't win, they had to commit themselves in the application to a number of policy moves that nobody else knew anything about.
Yeah, and we have to, when we talk about getting money, because Wyoming applied for $162 million to Race to the Top, we didn't get it. But the important point to know is that states were rushing to adopt the standards so they could get points on the competitive grant, so that they could then win money. So it wasn't, people say, oh, well, we didn't get Race to the Top, so we didn't adopt it because of that. It was about the point system.
Well, as my grandmother used to tell me, you take their money, you got to follow their rules, and that's what it sounds like.
Well, if you apply for their money,
but
you follow the rules, even if you don't get the money.
It wasn't even you got the money; it's just applying for it. Now, I have to ask Christy, who is a parent from
Green River.
Green River.
Yes.
So you come from a smaller school district, smaller than Laramie County 1. I mean, really. And you had. How do you feel about having no input and the standards that were adopted?
Well, I'm not only my parent, but I'm also a teacher in Green River, and I had no idea that we.
Twice.
That is correct. I was, and I had no idea, even as a teacher, when I received a memo saying, hey, there's a training for the new standards. Do you want to be part of that? And so I thought, oh dear, okay, I need to learn something new. So signed up for that. And then, of course, as a mother, I had no idea that my children, everything would be overhauled in their education and what I needed to teach.
So this replaces the PAWS, the Wyoming standards, correct?
It will.
It
Yeah,
will.
this-
It has in several content areas. from what I
Two,
understand.
the English language arts and math.
Okay, so it has already, and then they're in the process of adopting the science,
Those are lurking in the wings.
voc ed or something.
And they're even worse than Common Core's math standards. So that's part of the issue. If one can at least revise the math standards for Wyoming, that will prevent these awful science standards from being adopted and might lead to stronger science standards because science depends upon good math standards.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that from my mom being a chemist, that she was also really good at math.
Well, that's what I mean. Nationally and here in Wyoming, one of the biggest issues with the math standards is this lack of the ability for students to achieve in STEM, the science, technology, medicine. So that's engineering. That's the really, really big issue, and I think it's something that gets missed and really wasn't discussed. States signed on, and we've rushed towards it, and now we're going to see this large gap in the high schools for kids who essentially will not be equipped to take STEM career college courses.
Well, let me take a quick break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to continue our discussion. We're going to let them talk for a significant portion, take your phone calls throughout, but if you're going to call in, please make it succinct, because we do have 3 guests here that want to talk. So, we'll be back after this. Good morning. Welcome back to the morning show on AM 650 KGAB. I'm Amy Richards, and in the studio with me, we have Amy Edmonds, Christy Hooley, and Dr. Sandra Stotsky. We're talking about the Common Core standards, the ones we've already adopted and the ones we're about to adopt or they're in the process of. And there is a bill, House Bill 97, which will be, it is probably going to be introduced by Representative Reeder, Tom Reeder in the House. And it is signed on, not a surprise, Representative Lynn Hutchings, and Dave Miller, Representative Miller, and Senators Dockstader and Larry Hicks. So, Dan Dockstader and Larry Hicks. I should probably get their first names in there. Anyways, so we were talking about Christy as a parent. You didn't even, and a teacher, she didn't even know this was coming down the pike until you got the memo, so there was no preamble to it, no pre-warning. You just kind of got the memo and said, oh.
That's right. There was no discussion about whether or not we wanted to change them, just that, oh, they've been changed, here's a training you need to go if you want to be ready to put this in your classroom.
So when you first saw the, what grade do you teach?
I was teaching 5th grade at that time.
So when you saw the standards for 5th grade, what did you think?
You know, it is wrapped up beautifully in a nice package, and yes, our standards did need some work, and so, of course, initially I thought, oh, this is going to fix those problems. But I was not aware at that time where it was going to lead me in my search to implement it in my classroom, and then I discovered that, unfortunately, everything that looked beautifully wrapped up in a nice little package brought a lot of problems. Dr. Stotsky can really speak to the issues that I started to uncover about writing was changing, emphasis on informational text, and different ways to teach reading, which I felt was very interesting because I had taught 1st grade, I had also taught 5th grade, and I thought I knew great strategies, things to teach children for reading, and I was confused on some of the new strategies that they were suggesting we use to implement these new standards.
So it sounds like they were dropped in your lap and you had to figure it out.
That is right. That is
Okay.
right.
And Dr. Stotsky, you want to expand on what she is just talking about?
That, yes, Christy is telling you about something that happened to teachers all over the country, and they were surprised because they didn't know that there were that many strings attached to whatever they were adopting. They didn't understand that in many cases they would have people called Common Core consultants who would come in, who had been somehow anointed as being insiders who knew what kind of curriculum would go with the standards, even though they were being told Common Core was simply standards. That was not so. There were to be some specific texts that they were to think about incorporating. So somehow it slid very quickly over to local curricula now being determined by these national and so-called state standards, but they were really national.
Well, when I hear standards like what we did for the state, this is what your kid needs to know in 5th grade. This is what they need to know in math. That's kind of what we did. Now, whether or not you like the state standards that we had, maybe they weren't all that great. Who knows? But this is what you need to know. This is what the kids should know, and they check it off when they do. You don't. But they didn't tell you, Christy, under the previous standards, what books to read or what to teach, did they?
No, they did not.
They just said this kid needs to be here.
That is right.
Because I do remember, my son is now graduating from college this year, but he did go through the original the original standards.
Right. But what is changing is the way children are supposed to show you how they know these things and the way in which that will be assessed. And because of the way children are being assessed, we have to teach a particular way. And the standards are written in such a way that if you don't teach to that particular strategy or style, then it's as if the children don't know something that they potentially probably do know.
Okay. And don't we have a problem with assessment in Wyoming because it's not matching up to the standards?
Right now we're sort of, because we've adopted the Common Core standards and because the pause was not aligned to it, we're sort of in this middle quasi ground of what are we going to do, what's the state going to, because obviously teachers are going to be teaching this or are teaching the Common Core curriculum. The pause test doesn't test for that, or it's being they're attempting to convert it over. So yeah, the state's in sort of a middle ground, and what we obviously in this bill, what we would like to see is that the state removes itself from the Smarter Balanced consortium, and the state owns and controls the tests that we administer to our children, that the teachers in Wyoming work on writing those questions, and that it's ours, so that we have control over it. Belonging to a major consortium of 26 states, including California, Michigan, does not mean that Wyoming. Someone said, we have to be part of Smarter Balance because we have a seat at the table. And I love this analogy. I heard it from someone else. Before the Smarter Balanced, Wyoming owned the table. It was our table. Now we simply are one of a whole bunch of states who teach millions of more children than we do here. We are going to have little to zero impact on that test.
Well, it's kind of like our representation in Congress. We only have one representative because of our population.
Right.
So what makes anybody think we're going to have, what I'm hearing you saying is, what makes anybody think that we're going to have more representation in this consortium?
Right.
Because we are a small population state.
Right.
So, I mean, not that our congressman she doesn't do a good job, she does. But we do only have one representative in the House of Representatives. So I understand your point, where when you're in a consortium with a lot of big states, Massachusetts and Michigan, Massachusetts in it? California. Yeah, that's the biggest state, probably has.
Massachusetts is in the other consortium, and both of them were funded by the USDE. And somewhere down the pike, the two different consortia are to be brought together for their cut scores and some other aspects. But that's later on. You see, they keep dropping little bits of news regularly. So at first you don't know all the strings and details.
Right. So we're going to run out of time for this half hour in a minute. We're going to go to news, but we'll come back, and then we'll continue our discussion and talk more about what Representative Reeder and the other co-sponsors of the bill, what it will actually do, because it's a longer bill than we like. I think it's one of the longer bills I've seen. I've seen bills that are 2 pages. This one's a little long. So we're going to do that. Now, any last words for this hour, former legislator, Ms. Edmonds?
Just to remind folks one more time, today's a great day if you want to head up to the Capitol. There's going to be a group of parents who've come down from all over the state. If you're one of those parents listening right now and are concerned, head on up to the Capitol between 8 and 9. We've got buttons and we've got drinks, and we'd love to have you come up and participate, watch the House chambers, be part of this process of standing against the Common Core.
Well, once again, you do say that this bill will likely be up for introduction in the House, because it is a House bill, House Bill 97. If you want to look it up, you can go to legisweb.state.wy.us, look for the bill list, pull up the bill, House Bill 97, and you can make yourself a copy of it so you know exactly what it says. Because sometimes people talk about bills and they're not really sure what it says. This one's pretty easy to read. It's long. It is long. And that's likely to be up in the House of Representatives today for an introduction vote, and they need 40 votes, correct?
Yeah, it's a 2/3 just to get the bill introduced.
Right. And one thing that one of Dan Neal was in the other day telling people about lobbying. He said, in a budget session, if you don't get your bill through, which you guys hope you do, you can always ask for it to be an interim topic and something that they discuss, so that
Yeah.
in the regular session where you don't need the 2/3.
Yeah, and for folks who really understand or need to understand the process, there's a lot of folks who've read the bill, they have questions and things inside the bill. We need to get it introduced, and then we can talk about making changes.
Okay, well, we do have to go to news, and we'll be back after this. And welcome back to the Morning Zone on AM 650 KGAB. We're going to go to the rush minute in just a few seconds, but I do want to let you know, coming up after the break, we're going to continue our discussion on the Common Core and House Bill 97. If you have time, go to the Legis website, legisweb.state.wy.us, and pull up the bill and read it. We have Amy Edmonds, Christy Hooley, and Dr. Sandra Stotsky on, and we will be taking your phone calls. We are asking that you keep it a little brief so that they can get their message out. And I think Amy said that she thinks the bill, House Bill 97, which would address the Common Core standards, is going to come up for introduction this afternoon in the House. We are going to go to Rush right now, and we'll be back after this.
A member of Al-Qaeda who's also an American citizen is being watched by the regime. CIA knows who he is, and they know where he is. They've got drones trained on the guy, watching his every move. But nobody at the CIA will push the button, toggle the joystick, or pull the trigger because the Justice Department hasn't finished building a case against the guy. Now, 4 regime officials told AP that this terrorist is in a country that does not allow U.S. military operations on their soil. According to Obama's new policy, only the military can kill terrorists on foreign soil, not the CIA. That supposedly has created a conundrum for the White House. And since there's a conundrum, nobody can drone this guy into the next life. The House Intelligence Committee chair, Republican Mike Rogers, complains that a number of terrorists are now out of reach due to Obama's new rules. He said it's very clear that there have been missed opportunities. He worries that inaction means fewer terror plots will be disrupted and increases the risks for our troops. Complicating matters even further, House and Senate appropriators have blocked money to move drone operations from the CIA to the Pentagon. None of this matters a hill of beans. Obama, you see, has the power to give the order unilaterally. He only has to say that he wants the terrorist taken out, and the terrorist will be taken out. So the question is, why won't he say it about this guy?
Valentine's Day is this Friday, and ProFlowers is offering an amazing deal. 1 dozen gorgeous long-stem assorted roses, plus a free elegant ruby vase and a free box of gourmet chocolates for just $29.99. Go to ProFlowers.com, click on the blue radio microphone in the upper right corner, and enter the secret code ROSE1. But hurry, this incredible deal expires this Thursday at midnight. Flower prices will skyrocket this week. Order now from ProFlowers to get huge savings, plus pick the delivery date, and it's guaranteed. 1 dozen colorful, long-stem assorted roses sent fresh from the fields, guaranteed to stay fresh and beautiful for at least 7 full days. Plus a free premium ruby vase and free gourmet chocolates, all for only $29.99. Remember, flower prices can double, even triple this week, and this incredible offer expires this Thursday at midnight. The only way to get this amazing deal is to visit ProFlowers.com. Click on the blue microphone in the upper right corner and enter the secret code ROSE1. That's ProFlowers.com, secret code ROSE1.
It's the Herminator, Herman Cain, weeknights on AM 650 KGAB.
Giants weather.
A small weather system produced a few snow flurries and snow showers over southeastern Wyoming last night. Ahead of that system, the winds really got strong and gusty last evening, but they have dropped down, but they're not done. They're just taking a break. Wind speeds are going to crank up again later today and especially tonight into Thursday as a storm system scoots across Montana and North Dakota. And when we get storms that pass to our north, we always get very windy. So a high wind watch is in effect from tonight through late Thursday afternoon as winds will pick up again.
From the start of your long, hard work day to quitting time, Boot Barn has boots and apparel to keep you safe and comfortable. Right now, save $20 on best-selling Justin Original Work Boots in hybrid square and safety toe. Only Boot Barn has the largest selection of sizes and styles, so you can get in, get what you need, and get on home.
Dad's home!
With Blue Cross Blue Shield of Wyoming, it's more than coverage, it's care. We're here for you online or on the phone, ready to help you through the process of learning, comparing plans, and enrolling in healthcare coverage that makes sense for you. It's online at bcbswy.com/shopping or on the phone at 800-851-2227. Learn, compare, and enroll with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Wyoming, an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association.
A high wind watch is in effect for southeastern Wyoming tonight through Thursday afternoon. Today, it'll be partly to mostly cloudy, becoming windy later in the day, highs mid-40s. Very windy tonight, lows mid to upper 30s. Very windy Thursday, cloudy, low 50s. Windy Thursday night, low 30s. Partly to mostly cloudy for Friday and Saturday with a few widely scattered snow showers possible with highs in the 40s. I'm meteorologist Don Day with more weather on demand at KGAB.com.
All right. Good morning. Welcome back to the morning show on AM 650 KGAB. I got to push all these buttons, every single one of them. In the studio with me is Amy Edmonds, former legislator and education policy analyst. And
Wyoming Liberty Group.
The Liberty Group. I was going to say that. WLG I have written down here. Christy Hooley, who is a teacher and a parent in Green River. And what grade do you teach now?
I actually resigned my position.
Okay. So now you're just a parent. But at the time when this all came down, you were a teacher and a parent.
That's
and
right.
then Dr. Sandra Stotsky, and you were involved in this kind of from the beginning, correct?
I was on Common Core's validation committee.
Right. So
most
let's start with
recently.
you. A lot of people don't like Common Core. We've heard some of the reasons why, but what do you think should happen in the state of Wyoming? Something like this bill?
This is an excellent start. And then when a committee is appointed, however one divides the appointing power, and you involve all the right people for a change, which means high school math and English teachers and people from higher ed who actually teach college freshmen, then you're apt to get the development of first-class standards in math and English.
So what is the main issue with the math standards? They don't line up with what you need in college?
There's a huge gap. There are missing standards. There are a number of problems, but the main one that is easy for most people to understand is that Common Core's math standards end with a very weak Algebra 2 course, and they don't have standards that get you from weak Algebra 2 up to a STEM major in your freshman year. So those missing standards have to be either put in, or a Department of Ed has to give directives to schools to make sure that the high schools are putting them in. That's the math issue. In English, we have a different issue.
And what would that be?
And that is to make sure that the high school English teachers can teach 70% literature, not 70% informational text, which many district superintendents and departments of ed are confused about. They think Common Core requires 70% information in the English class, so English teachers have been getting rid of the great literature they once taught.
Well, that would stink since I was an English major in college, and the first thing I had to do was read the great literature, Shakespeare, Tennyson. I started with English, English literature, and then we moved to the American literature. But yeah, that would really stink.
Well, it's not helpful to students who want to become college ready, because this informational text that is being introduced is of such variable quality and has such problems in it in terms of what kind of material is being called informational, that It would be much better all the way around if you had some decent literary text for English teachers rather than something that borders on either indoctrination type of material or fragmented informational texts on a variety of subjects about which English teachers can't teach anything anyway.
Right, so they're not teaching, how to read or write the English language. They're teaching informational text, which is, they go to the internet and pulling it off there? Is that what they're doing?
It's coming from a variety of sources that are labeled Common Core aligned.
Okay. All right, so no longer we're not teaching literature in high school, how to read.
It's
the great
reduced very considerably.
Okay, so 70% the informational, and then...
This is what they're told, but it's wrong. It's not actually what the Common Core own text even says it should be, a focus on literature, but for some reason it's been totally confused by people who read it, who don't seem to understand the meaning of reasonably clear English sentences, and it's not being straightened out by the writers of Common Core's English language standards, one of whom is now president of the college boards.
Okay.
So confusion reigns everywhere.
Now, do the college boards, are they aligned to the Common Core standards, or are they aligned to...
They're in the process of being aligned.
So if you want to...
That's important for private schools, for homeschoolers, for basically anyone who wants their child to go into a higher education.
Well,
So it really affects everyone.
My son was in the IB program at East, so his standards were higher anyways.
Yes, and we don't know if the IB programs will be able to last.
Okay, and
because everything's in a state of flux right now, and it depends whether the tests drive all of these alternatives, including the classical curriculum that's in many charter schools. They're worried to death that they're going to lose the very reason parents wanted their kids in that kind of a school.
Right, because I know in the IB curriculum, your math standards were ridiculously high by the time you got done and had to take your final higher level exam in math. So a lot of kids looked at that math test and said, I'm going to take higher level in science instead. But because the standards are pretty high, so that it's way above the Algebra 2.
It's way above Algebra 2, but that is what the careers of the 21st century require. Those are the jobs that require science majors, computer science majors, economics majors, or math majors, or engineering. Always has required at least a Calculus 1 course in the freshman year. And if kids can't get to it, then we won't have any American-born or educated engineers available in this country. It's not going to be that far off in the future before this disaster hits us.
Okay. Well, I hate to keep doing this, but I got to get this done. So I'm going to take a break, and then we'll have the rest of the hour, which will be about 10 minutes, to just wind this all up. So we're going to do this. We'll be back after this.
News Talk Radio, AM 650, KGAB.
Welcome back to the morning show on AM 650 KGAB. I'm Amy Richards. In the studio with me, I have former Representative Amy Edmonds, who's now a policy analyst, education policy analyst with the Wyoming Liberty Group. Christy Hooley, who is a former teacher but current parent. You're always a parent. You're never not a parent. I found that out in Green River. And Dr. Sandra Stotsky, who was part of
Common Core's validation.
And so you were just telling me about, and y'all were, but mostly Dr. Stotsky, you're saying that one of the other issues with Common Core is it doesn't sound like it addresses any student's needs. That you're not talking about the smart kids. It doesn't appear that it's really, what does it do? Who is it helping?
It is not so much focused on who it's helping. It's a question of centralized control of education. And that's what central planners want. It really isn't a concern to them, so far as a lot of us can see, whether they're introducing chaos in the public schools or not. Whatever happens as long as central planning takes place and you have a standardized system of education across 50 states.
And so, Christy, when you first saw what you had to do, you were like, huh?
Yes, in fact, I was very confused about some of the things I was asked to implement. So I started searching other states who I knew were at least a year or so ahead of us in the implementation process, looked to Utah, and there I found all kinds of situations where people were not agreeing with what was happening. And as I looked closer to see the issues that were happening with those that were already using it, I really became concerned and started to research even further.
All right, well, it looks like we have a phone call. Good morning, caller. We're running out of time, so if you have a question, go ahead and ask it.
Not a question, just a real quick comment, listening to everything going on. Would it be fair to say that this Common Core thing is kind of like the Obamacare of education?
Who wants to take that? He says it's kind of like the Obamacare of education. Who wants to take? Doctor?
Yes, some of the same features are there.
That they want to
the notion of
everything.
centralizing, standardizing care across the entire population. And yes, there will be those unfortunate people whose insurance policy is dropped. There will be large pockets of different kinds of kids who will not be served by this, but that's not going to deter them from pushing ahead, and they will not admit that there are problems or failures, which is another issue. After all, they have developed, because they have the brains, they think, to know what's best for other people's children.
Well, no doubt there's an agenda to be met, and they're,
Hold on.
right, they're not going to stop. I'm going to go.
Oh, yeah. No, I was just saying, hold on, Amy, because she was talking with a dead mic. So go ahead, Amy.
Sorry. I have to say that the PR behind this has been really quite amazing, both nationally and even here in Wyoming. The supporters of the Common Core, you know, they constantly come out now, and it's just an endless frustration for many of us, and say, you know, the folks that don't like the Common Core are misinformed. We are not misinformed. And it's frustrating that that's their only response to all of the information that we're giving, is simply to say we're misinformed.
And worse than that, they come out with really what are outright lies. This morning, for example, USA Today Online had an op-ed by Bill Gates himself. This was like a first, talking about all the myths. And actually, all the myths are correct, but they're trying to say that what people think is not so, and it's going to be a repetition of a number of false claims.
Well, but he's retired, doesn't have anything else to do. We're going to take another phone call. Good morning, you're on, and I'm going to go ahead and you're on the morning show.
Yeah, real quick, I just wanted to say, in so many instances, if you follow the money, you'll find another part of the story. And I think in this situation, if people pay attention, you'll start to hear the name like Pearson, those companies that are making these huge standardized tests. They're the ones that are really winning in this, because they stand to just make millions and millions on the backs of our education system and on our own children. And these large companies that are doing all these standardized tests, they're the ones that are really pushing a lot of this. And they have huge lobbyists that are huge money that's put into lobbyists to support all this. And I'm not saying that our legislators that they're in the pockets of our legislators, but boy, it sure is interesting. I'm sure they're getting a lot of pressure and a lot of lobbying from that. And unfortunately, it all comes back to the money. Somebody's going to gain from this, and it's the large companies that are making these standardized tests.
Well, I appreciate your comment. We're going to let them respond because we're running out of time.
Absolutely right on. And it started with who was mainly on the Standards Development Committee back in '09, mainly people from testing companies who were developing our national standards. That should have been the first clue to the media, but no one ever talked about how come testing experts are developing our standards, and now state legislatures all over the country are being asked to pick up the bills for the high tech that has to go into the schools in order for kids to take these, quotes, next generation tests. Yes, there are a lot of high tech companies making money out of this deal, but that was foreseen from the very beginning. They were there at the table.
Well, Christy, last word, because we're going to run out of time. As a parent, what do you think?
I think as a parent that you need to really understand what's happening in the schools and why teachers are not saying anything negative about it. I tried to do that, and I was shut down in my school district, and many teachers are unable to have a true discussion of how they feel for fear that there will be repercussions in their job. I was asked not to speak anymore, a gag order, I guess you could say, and that's a red flag to me that teachers are not allowed to have a discussion about, is this really the best thing for our children?
And let me finish with Miss Amy, because she is a former legislator. This didn't happen with our state standards. Teachers and parents, I mean, the process was different.
Absolutely. I mean, we came and created standards, and while the standards process is not great, and that's one of the things in this bill that we're trying to address, and it's not perfect, and we've had lots of people talk about how do we make this well, and we want to get, as Sandra said, the right people at the table. We want them to be involved, and we want them to be held accountable by everybody in the state. So we need to do that. We need to develop that process.
All right, she's good. She's almost got us there. The bill is House Bill 97. Amy says it's going to be up for possible introduction this afternoon. It has to be up by Friday. We know that.
Yeah.
It does need a 2/3 majority in the House, which means 40 votes in order to be introduced and move along. So if you want to go.
Yeah, come up to the Capitol this morning. Like I said, we've got groups of parents that have come down from all over the state. They've got buttons they're wearing, and they're just kind of talking to each other. It's a great opportunity for folks to come out. So if you're listening to this and you're a parent or a taxpayer and you're interested, come to the Capitol.
Well, I'd like to thank all my guests, Amy Edmonds, Education Policy Analyst with the Wyoming Liberty Group. Christy Hooley, it's nice to hear from former teacher and a parent, because I think the parents are the ones that are left out most in this discussion. And Dr. Sandra Stotsky, who was on the Common Core Standards Validation. So if anybody knows what you're talking about, you do, because you were there.
I think so.
So if anybody has any questions, you can go find Amy. She'll point you to her if you have any more questions. It is time to go to News at the Top of the Hour. Thanks for coming in, ladies.
Thank
It was
you.
a lot of fun. And good luck with the bill. We'll follow it. We'll see what happens to it. We are going to go to News